Damien was 37 years old, earned a steady salary of $66,000 a year as an aerospace mechanic at Joint Base Lewis McChord, and at 11:03 a.m. on a Friday, he discovered his marriage was a meticulously constructed lie. He was sitting in the temporary barracks at a forward operating base 200 miles away, the air thick with the smell of hydraulic fluid and stale coffee, when his phone buzzed. It was a simple notification from his Ring security camera, the $199 device he'd installed on their front porch in Tacoma's Stadium District a year ago. The thumbnail showed a car he didn't recognize, a late-model white Lexus RX 350, a vehicle that cost at least $50,000, parked in their driveway. Motion detected. He felt a small, cold knot tighten in his stomach. He tapped the notification. The video played. He saw the Lexus pull up. The driver's side door opened, and a man he'd never seen before got out. He was tall, lean, dressed in expensive-looking athletic wear, the kind of $150 Lululemon joggers and $90 technical shirt Zora always admired. The man walked confidently up their front path, past the rose bushes Damien had planted, and disappeared from the frame as he approached the door. A moment later, the notification ended. The front door had opened and closed off-camera. Damien knew this because the app told him the event lasted 16 seconds. He stared at the screen, the knot in his gut turning to ice. Zora was home. She was supposed to be working from home, a remote consulting gig that paid her well but had unpredictable hours. He had no idea who this man was. He told himself there were 100 innocent explanations, a colleague, a delivery, a mistake. But the man hadn't been carrying a package, and his confident stride wasn't that of someone arriving at the wrong address. Damien's thumb hovered over the call button for Zora, but he stopped. Something told him not to ask. Not yet. Instead, a grim curiosity took hold. He opened the Ring app's history. He scrolled back. Their life, on the surface, was the picture of success for a young black couple in the Pacific Northwest. The house on North 21st Street, purchased 2 years ago for $550,000, was their biggest shared accomplishment. It was a beautiful 1920s craftsman, painstakingly restored. Zora had overseen the renovations, picking out the $7,000 quartz countertops for the kitchen and the $4,000 freestanding tub for the master bathroom. Damien, with his mechanic's hands, had done the practical work, refinishing the original hardwood floors, rewiring the old knob and tube electricity, spending weekends covered in sawdust and paint. He saw his sweat and his savings in every wall of that house. His $66,000 salary, combined with his deployment bonuses, had provided the bulk of the down payment. Zora's income was higher, closer to 6 figures, but it was inconsistent. She loved the idea of the house, the status it conferred in their social circle, more than the reality of its upkeep. The contrast between them was written in their possessions. Damien drove a 7-year-old Ford F-150, a reliable workhorse he'd bought used for $28,000, and maintained himself. On his wrist was a battered but functional $120 G-Shock watch, its face scratched from countless hours working inside the cramped engine bays of C-17 Globemasters. His clothes were Carhartt and Dickies, practical and durable. Zora drove a brand-new Mazda CX-5, a sleek, deep blue SUV that had cost $38,000. Her watch was a $600 Michelle, a gift to herself after landing a big client. Her closet was a curated collection of brands Damien had never heard of, dresses that cost $400 and handbags that pushed $2,000. She had a $3,200 Peloton bike in the spare bedroom that she used 3 times a week, and she attended Pilates classes at a boutique downtown studio. The classes were $45 per session. "It's for my core, baby," she'd said one evening, stretching her long, elegant limbs on their $2,500 West Elm sofa. "Ronan is a miracle worker. My posture has never been better." Damien had nodded, sipping his beer. He was tired. He'd just finished a 70-hour week on the flight line, preparing a squadron for deployment. His hands ached, and there was a persistent smell of jet fuel under his fingernails that never seemed to wash out completely. He looked at Zora, her deep brown skin luminous in the soft light of their living room lamp, her hair in a crown of immaculate twists. She was beautiful, ambitious, and sophisticated. He was a simple man, a mechanic. He'd always felt he was lucky to have her, that he was punching above his weight. He often wondered what she saw in him. "That's good, honey," he'd said. "Whatever makes you happy." He had no idea how wrong he was. The happiness she was finding had nothing to do with posture and everything to do with the man whose name she had just so casually mentioned. He thought their domestic life was a stable facade, a foundation they were building together. He loved the quiet moments, cooking dinner together while listening to old soul music, the smell of her expensive $72 diptyque candle, mixing with the aroma of garlic and onions. He loved waking up next to her, the curve of her back pressed against him. He saw these scenes as the bedrock of their marriage. To Zora, he would soon learn, they were merely the set dressing for a life she was living when he wasn't looking. The house wasn't a home, it was a stage, and his role was the dutiful, absent husband, conveniently away on duty, funding the production. The signs of her escalating betrayal had been there, hiding in plain sight. But he had been too trusting, too exhausted, too in love to see them. Her cruelty wasn't overt. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, a slow erosion of respect that he had mistaken for the normal stresses of a demanding career and a new mortgage. It started with comments about his job. He'd come home, his uniform smelling of the hangar, and she would wrinkle her nose. "Can you please shower before you sit on the new sofa? It's Italian leather." The sofa had cost them $4,000. He'd apologized and trudged upstairs, feeling like a dirty child. Then came the comparisons. Her friends were married to lawyers, tech executives, consultants, men who wore $3,000 suits and talked about stock options and quarterly earnings reports. Damien talked about torque wrenches and hydraulic pressures. One evening, they were at a dinner party at the home of one of Zora's colleagues. The house was a glass and steel monstrosity on the waterfront, probably worth $3 million. The host, a man named Marcus, held court, describing a recent trip to Monaco. "The key is to leverage your assets," Marcus had said, swirling a glass of what Damien was sure was very expensive wine. "You can't build wealth working for a salary." Later, in the car on the way home, Zora was quiet. The silence was heavy. "What's wrong?" Damien had asked, his hands gripping the steering wheel of his F-150. "Nothing," she said, staring out the window. "It's just, did you hear Marcus? He's 35. He's retiring next year. His wife doesn't have to work." "We're doing okay, Zora," Damien said, his voice quiet. "We have the house. We have savings." She laughed, a short, sharp sound with no humor in it. "You call this okay? Damien, you're a grease monkey for the government. Your salary has a ceiling, and it's not a very high one. We're not building wealth. We're treading water in a very expensive city." The words grease monkey landed like a punch to the gut. He had never been ashamed of his work. He was a master craftsman, responsible for the safety of aircraft worth hundreds of millions of dollars and the lives of the crews who flew them. It was honorable, skilled work. To her, it was just dirty. From that night on, a subtle contempt colored her interactions with him. She stopped asking about his day. When he talked about a complex engine repair he'd completed, her eyes would glaze over. Her phone, once left casually on the counter, was now always screened down. It would buzz with a text, and she'd snatch it up, a small secret smile playing on her lips before she typed a rapid reply. "Who's that?" he'd ask. "Just my sister," she'd say every time. The week before his last deployment, the one he was currently on, They had a fight. It was about money. She wanted to do a $20,000 remodel of the back deck. "We can't afford that right now, Zora," he'd said, looking at their budget on his laptop. The screen showed their $3,500 monthly mortgage payment and their dwindling savings account. "Not unless you land that big contract you were talking about." "Oh, so it's my fault now?" she snapped. "Maybe if you got a real job in the private sector, we wouldn't have to worry about a $20,000 deck. My friend Aaliyah's husband just bought her a new Mercedes for her birthday. A $60,000 car. I'm asking for a deck." "I have a real job, Zora," he said, his voice dangerously low. "It's the job that paid for most of this house." "Don't you dare throw that in my face," she hissed. "I'm the one who makes this house a home. I'm the one with the vision. All you do is work and sleep. You're always gone. I'm here, alone, managing everything." He remembered staring at her, this beautiful woman he loved, and feeling a chasm open between them. He felt a profound sense of loneliness. She saw his absence not as a sacrifice for their country and their future, but as a personal inconvenience, a failure to provide the lifestyle she felt she deserved. He backed down, as he always did. He promised they would look at the numbers again when he got back. He wanted peace before he left. He kissed her goodbye at the front door a few days later, and she smiled, telling him to be safe. "I'll miss you," she'd said. It was a lie. Her real life was about to begin the moment his truck pulled out of the driveway. Her 11 a.m. appointments were already on the calendar. Back in the barracks, the video of the white Lexus replayed in Damien's mind. He tapped on the app's history again. His finger, calloused and stained with grease, moved with a sickening purpose. He scrolled back a week. Tuesday, 11:01 a.m. There it was, the same white Lexus RX 350. Another 16-second clip. The man gets out, walks to the door, disappears inside. Damien's heart hammered against his ribs. It felt like one of his engines, shaking violently before a catastrophic failure. He kept scrolling. Another Tuesday, 10:59 a.m. Another and another. His thumb flew across the screen, a blur of dates and thumbnails. For the last 90 days, a period that covered his entire deployment, the pattern was brutally consistent. 14 Tuesdays. 14 visits from the white Lexus, all arriving between 10:59 a.m. and 11:04 a.m. The visits always lasted for a similar duration. The car would reappear on the camera feed, leaving around 12:45 p.m. Nearly 2 hours, every single Tuesday. The room felt like it was tilting. The air grew thin. He could hear the blood pounding in his ears. He zoomed in on the clearest video, a recording from 2 weeks prior. The sun had been bright that day, catching the license plate perfectly. He took a screenshot, his hand trembling so badly it took 3 tries. He opened his web browser and typed the license plate number into a public record search engine. He paid the $4.99 fee with his credit card. The results loaded in seconds. Vehicle, 2022 Lexus RX 350, white. Registered owner, Ronin Wellness LLC. Address, 742 Pacific Avenue, Tacoma, WA. Ronin, the Pilates instructor, the miracle worker. Damien felt a wave of nausea so intense he had to close his eyes. The casual way she had said his name at dinner. The secret smiles at her phone. The contempt in her voice. It all clicked into place. The tumblers of a lock he never knew existed falling into a horrifying alignment. This wasn't a new fling. The consistency, the sheer arrogance of it. The same day, the same time, every single week, spoke of a long-running, comfortable arrangement. She knew his schedule. She knew Tuesdays were the days he was typically in the field for training exercises, often at the Yakima Training Center, hours away, with no cell service. "He's always in the field," she must have told Ronan. It was their safe time. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him. replacing the shock and the nausea. The grief would come later. Right now, his mind, trained to diagnose and solve complex mechanical problems, kicked into a different gear. This was a new kind of problem. A system had failed. He needed to understand the scope of the failure, gather all the data, and then formulate a plan of action. He didn't smash his fist into the wall. He didn't scream. He methodically opened his laptop and began to download every single video file from the Ring server. Each one was a small, damning piece of evidence. He labeled them meticulously: visit 01 date MP4, visit 02 date MP4, 14 files in total, the foundation of his case, the beginning of the end. The hardest part was pretending. The next few days were an exercise in brutal self-control. He had to maintain the facade that he was still the same trusting husband, hundreds of miles away, counting the days until he came home. He had to act normal while his world was crumbling. Each lie he told, each casual conversation he endured, was a scene in a play he was forced to perform. The first test came that evening. Zora called him at 7 p.m., her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, baby, how was your day?" Damien was sitting on his bunk, the 14 video files open on his laptop screen. He could see the white Lexus in his peripheral vision. He took a slow breath. "It was long," he said, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "Just running diagnostics on a C-17, same old." "Poor thing," she cooed. "I miss you. The house feels so empty without you." He felt a surge of pure, cold rage. "Yeah? What did you do today?" he asked, the question a carefully placed landmine. "Oh, nothing exciting," she said, the lie slipping out as easily as a breath. "I had my Pilates class this morning, of course. Ronan kicked my butt. Then just a bunch of conference calls. I ordered Thai food for dinner. I wish you were here to share it." The callback to Ronan's name was so brazen it almost made him laugh. She was hiding in plain sight. He was the fool. "Sounds nice," he managed to say. "I gotta run. The sergeant is calling a meeting. Talk to you tomorrow." "Okay, baby. Be safe. I love you." "You too," he said, and hung up before he could be forced to say the words back. He stared at the phone in his hand, feeling nothing. The man who had loved Zora was gone. In his place was a cold, methodical stranger. He spent the weekend gathering more evidence. The 14 video files were just the beginning. He logged into his military personnel portal and downloaded his official duty rosters and flight logs for the past 6 months. His advantage, he realized, was in the details she had overlooked. She assumed when he was in the field, he was always at the remote Yakima base, but his logs told a different story. He highlighted 5 of the 14 Tuesdays in question. On those days, he hadn't been in Yakima. He had been on duty at McCord Field, the Air Force base co-located with Fort Lewis, a mere 15-minute drive from their house. He could have come home for lunch. He could have surprised her. The thought that he had been so close, completely oblivious while another man was in his home, in his bed, made his blood run cold. But it also armed him. Her entire affair was predicated on a false assumption of his distance. The flight logs were proof. He created a secure folder on a thumb drive, a $20 SanDisk he bought from the base exchange. He named it Project 15. Inside, he created 2 subfolders, video evidence and location proof. He was building a case, piece by piece, with the same precision he used to rebuild a billion-dollar aircraft engine. There would be no emotional outbursts, no messy confrontations until he was ready. This would be a controlled demolition. The final piece of his performance was a video call on Sunday. He had to show her his face, to prove with his eyes that nothing was wrong. He angled the laptop camera to hide the Spartan bleakness of the barracks. When her face appeared on the screen, smiling, her luminous skin glowing, he felt a distant pang of what he used to feel. It was like a phantom limb, an ache for something that had been amputated. "There's my handsome husband," she said. "Hey, you," he said, forcing a smile. It felt like stretching a cold rubber band. "You look beautiful." "Just got back from brunch with the girls," she said, fluffing her hair. "We went to that new place on the waterfront. You would have loved it." They talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Her friends, his work, the weather. Every word she spoke was a lie, and every word he spoke was a performance. He was watching a stranger, and a stranger was watching him. He was playing dumb, gathering his strength, waiting for the moment to strike. When they said their goodbyes, he felt a profound sense of relief. The act was exhausting. He had made it through another scene. The curtain was about to fall on their marriage, and she had no idea she was in the final act. On Monday morning, at 800 hours sharp, Damien walked into the law offices of Adebayo and Associates in downtown Tacoma. He had found Ms. Adebayo through a veterans resource network. She was a former JAG officer, known for being sharp, relentless, and discreet. Her office was on the 20th floor of a glass tower with a panoramic view of the Puget Sound. The space was modern and minimalist, dominated by a massive $4,000 mahogany desk. Ms. Adebayo was a tall, elegant black woman in her late 40s, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit that probably cost $2,000. She did not waste time with pleasantries. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice crisp, "my paralegal said your situation is time-sensitive. Please sit." Damien sat in one of the two leather chairs opposite her. He placed the $20 SanDisk thumb drive on her desk. "Everything you need to know is on here," he said. Ms. Adebayo raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. She inserted the drive into her laptop. Damien watched as she opened the folder labeled Project 15. Her expression remained neutral as she clicked open the video evidence folder and played the first clip. The white Lexus pulled into the driveway. She watched for a few seconds, then clicked to the next, and the next. She scanned the timestamps. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Then she opened the location-proof folder. She examined the scanned copies of his flight logs and duty rosters, her finger tracing his location on the dates that corresponded with the videos. She was silent for a full 5 minutes, absorbing the information. The only sound in the room was the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. Finally, she looked up from the screen, her gaze direct and piercing. "She's consistent," Ms. Adebayo said. It wasn't a question. "And careless." "Yes, ma'am," Damien replied. "The man in the video is Ronan, her Pilates instructor. His business is registered to that vehicle," Damien added, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "The affair has been going on for at least 2 years, based on other things I've pieced together. These 14 visits are just from the last 90 days. Ms. Adebayo nodded slowly. "The flight logs are the masterstroke, Mr. Jackson. Proving you were in close proximity obliterates any defense she might try to mount. It demonstrates a pattern of blatant deception, not just infidelity. In Washington, a community property state, this doesn't guarantee you a larger share of the assets, but it gives us overwhelming leverage, particularly regarding the disposition of the marital home." She leaned forward. "What is it that you want?" "I want the house," Damien said without hesitation. "I put the work into it. My money paid for most of it. I want it free and clear." "And her?" "I want her out of my life," he said. "Clean break. Whatever she's legally entitled to, fine. But I want this to be swift and decisive. I don't want a long, drawn-out fight." Ms. Adebayo's face broke into a thin, predatory smile. "With this evidence, a fight is the last thing she will want. A public court battle would be devastating for her reputation and for his. We can make this very, very quiet for her, or very, very loud. The choice will be hers." Her fee, she explained, was $450 per hour. They would need a $5,000 retainer. Damien didn't flinch. He transferred the money from his savings account using his phone right there in her office. It was half of what he had, but it was an investment in his future. They spent the next hour mapping out the strategy. The plan was simple and brutal. "Tomorrow is Tuesday," Damien said. "There will be a 15th visit." "You're certain?" Ms. Adebayo asked. "She has no reason to break the pattern," he said. "She thinks I'm 200 miles away until next month." "Good," the lawyer said. "Then we strike tomorrow. You will be the delivery mechanism for the initial shock. My office will deliver the legal consequences immediately after. We will file for divorce tomorrow afternoon, along with a motion for your exclusive use of the marital residence, citing the evidence on this drive as Exhibit A. A process server will be waiting." Damien felt a grim satisfaction. This was a mission plan. It had objectives, timelines, and a clear definition of success. He was no longer a victim. He was a strategist. He was taking back control. As he left the gleaming glass tower and stepped out into the cool Tacoma air, he felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't felt in days: peace. The strike was planned with military precision. Phase 1 was deception. That Monday evening, Damien called Zora. He told her his deployment had been unexpectedly extended by 3 weeks. He made his voice sound weary and disappointed. "Oh no, baby," Zora said, and the sympathy in her voice was so false, it was almost comical. He could practically hear the relief underneath it. 3 more weeks of freedom. 3 more Tuesdays. That's awful. I'm so sorry. I was looking forward to you coming home. Me too, Damien lied. Just have to get through it. I love you. I love you too, she whispered back. That was the last time they would ever say those words to each other. Phase 2 was insertion. At 10 p.m. that night, Damien boarded a late-night Alaska Airlines flight from the small regional airport near the base to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. The ticket cost him $280, paid for from his personal checking account. He sat in a window seat, watching the dark landscape slide by beneath him, feeling completely detached, as if he were watching a movie of someone else's life. He landed just after 11 p.m., took a $60 Uber to a nondescript 99-cent motel a few miles from his own neighborhood, and checked in under a false name. He didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, the minutes ticking by on his G-Shock, waiting for the dawn. Phase 3 was positioning. At 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, he drove his F-150, which he'd left in long-term parking at the airport, to his own neighborhood. The streets of the stadium district were quiet. He parked 3 blocks away from his house, on a side street where his truck wouldn't be seen. He walked the rest of the way, his heart a steady, cold drum in his chest. The air was cool and damp, typical for a Tacoma morning. He approached his own home from the alleyway, slipping behind the garage. At 10:45 a.m., he used his garage door opener. The door rumbled open and he slipped inside, closing it immediately behind him. The garage was his sanctuary. His tools were neatly arranged on a pegboard. The air smelled of oil and sawdust. It was the one part of the house that felt entirely his. He stood in the silence, listening. He could hear the faint sound of music playing inside the house. He could smell the lingering scent of Zora's $120 Chanel perfume. He was a ghost in his own home. He waited. At 11:02 a.m., he heard it. The crunch of tires on the gravel of their driveway, a car engine cutting off. It was the white Lexus. He knew it without seeing it. A car door opened and closed. Then, a second later, the passenger door. He heard Zora's laugh, a light, tinkling sound that now sounded like shattering glass to him. He heard a man's voice, low and confident. Ronan. The front door of the house opened and closed. They were inside. He stayed in the garage. He did not move. He let the minutes stretch out. He wanted there to be no ambiguity, no plausible deniability, no, he just dropped me off excuse. He gave them 8 minutes. He checked his watch. 11:08 a.m. It was time. Phase 4 was execution. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera app, making sure it was recording video. He took a slow, deep breath, the kind he took before starting a complex and dangerous repair. He turned the handle on the interior door that led from the garage into the laundry room and then the kitchen. The door opened with a soft click. He stepped inside. They were in the foyer just beyond the kitchen island. Zora had her back to him, her arms wrapped around Ronan's neck. He was facing the garage door, his hands on her waist. They were about to kiss. Ronan's eyes widened in shock as he saw Damien. His face went pale, a mask of pure panic. He froze, his hands still on Zora's body. Zora, sensing the sudden tension in him, turned her head. Her playful smile was still on her face. When she saw Damien standing there, his phone held up and recording, the smile didn't just fade. It was annihilated. Her face collapsed into a mess of confusion, then horror, then a dawning, sickening understanding. The color drained from her cheeks. Her deep brown skin looked ashen. Damien's voice, when he spoke, was unnervingly calm. It was still quiet and carried the weight of absolute finality. "Zora," he said, his eyes locking onto hers. He then shifted his gaze to the man still frozen in her embrace. "You must be Ronan. Don't worry. You didn't interrupt anything." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air, thick and suffocating. "This is visit 15 by my count. The first 14 are on the Ring camera. I have the receipts." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The quiet devastation of his words, the cold, hard evidence he cited, was more powerful than any shout. He watched the last flicker of hope die in Zora's eyes. He saw the truth of her situation crash down upon her. She had underestimated him. She had believed he was a simple, oblivious mechanic. She was just now realizing he was the most methodical, patient, and dangerous man she had ever known. He held the recording for another 5 seconds, capturing their stunned, guilty faces. Then he lowered the phone, turned his back on them without another word, and walked back into the garage, closing the door softly behind him. The coordinated strike was complete. The aftermath was a cascade of consequences, each one a direct result of that single, controlled moment of revelation. As Damien walked out of the garage and down the alley, his phone began to explode. He ignored it. He got into his F-150, started the engine, and drove away from the life he had built, a life that was now nothing more than a crime scene. He drove to a small park overlooking Commencement Bay and sat on a bench, the cool sea breeze on his face. He felt empty, not sad, not angry, just hollowed out. At 11:15 a.m., the first text from Zora arrived. "Damien, where are you? We need to talk. You don't understand." He didn't reply. At 11:22 a.m., a voicemail. Her voice was frantic. "Damien, pick up the phone. You can't just walk in and say something like that and leave. It's not what it looks like. Ronan was just dropping off some equipment." The lie was pathetic, an insult to his intelligence. He deleted it without listening to the end. At 11:45 a.m., another text. "Okay, I messed up. It was a mistake. A huge mistake. Please, baby, don't throw away our marriage over this. We can fix this. I love you." He sent the video file from his phone to Miss Adebayo with a simple 2-word message. Phase complete. The legal machinery, already primed, engaged with ruthless efficiency. At 1 p.m., Miss Adebayo's paralegal filed the divorce petition with the Pierce County Superior Court. At 3:30 p.m., a process server, a large, impassive man in a cheap suit, knocked on the door of the house on North 21st Street. He served Zora with the papers. The petition included the motion for Damien's exclusive use of the marital home, and attached as Exhibit A was a written declaration describing the 14 documented visits, with timestamps and a link to a secure server where the video files could be viewed by her legal counsel. Zora's voicemails devolved from frantic justification to pleading, then to anger, and finally to broken sobbing. He listened to one, just to hear it. "How could you do this to me?" she cried into the phone. "To us? I hate you. I hate you for this." He felt nothing. It was just noise. The consequences for Ronan were just as swift. His boutique Pilates studio, Ronan Wellness LLC, was built on an image of holistic health, trust, and personal integrity. He catered to the affluent women of Tacoma's North End. News of an affair with a client, especially the wife of a deployed service member, was poison. The story, inevitably, leaked. It traveled through the tight-knit community like a virus. One of Zora's friends from brunch told another friend, who was one of Ronan's clients. That client canceled her $200 monthly private package. Then another canceled. Within a month, his client list was cut in half. His business, built on a lie, could not survive the truth. 6 months later, the studio on Pacific Avenue was empty. The LLC dissolved. He was forced to sell the white Lexus to cover his debts. For Zora, the downfall was a slow, humiliating burn. Faced with incontrovertible evidence, her lawyer advised her not to fight. The divorce was finalized in 4 months. The judge granted Damien the house, now Trouts, the Janchiar, acknowledging his significant separate property contribution to the down payment and the egregious nature of the marital misconduct as a factor in the equitable, though not equal, distribution. Zora received a small portion of the home's equity, a check for $48,000, which was quickly consumed by her legal fees and the cost of starting over. She had to move out of the beautiful craftsman home she had curated and into a cramped, $1,800 a month apartment in a less fashionable part of town. She sold her $38,000 Mazda and bought a 10-year-old Honda Civic. The social circle she had so carefully cultivated evaporated. The invitations to dinner parties stopped. She was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered about over brunch. She had traded a loving, stable husband and a beautiful home for a few hours of excitement on Tuesday mornings. The price for those 14 visits was everything. 1 year later, the house on North 21st Street was quieter. It was different. The expensive West Elm sofa was gone, replaced by a comfortable, well-worn leather couch Damien had bought for $1,500 at a local furniture store. The diptyque candles were gone, the air now smelling of coffee, and the lemon-scented oil he used to polish the hardwood floors he had so carefully restored. The Peloton bike was sold. In its place was a rack for his own modest workout equipment. The house was his now, truly his. It was no longer a stage for a performance, but a place of peace. Damien had made changes in his own life, too. He had re-enlisted in the Air Force, but not for another tour on the flight line. He had taken a position as a training instructor at McCord Field. The pay was slightly better, bringing his salary to $72,000, but more importantly, the job was stable. No more long deployments, no more unpredictable schedules. He was home every night. He found a deep satisfaction in teaching the next generation of mechanics, passing on the skills he had honed over a decade and a half of service. His new role gave him a sense of purpose that had been missing. His weekends were his own. He spent them working on his truck, tending to the rose bushes in the front yard, and exploring the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest he had never had time to appreciate before. On Sunday mornings, he developed a new ritual. He would drive to Owen Beach at Point Defiance Park. He would walk along the rocky shoreline, watching the ferries glide across the water toward Vashon Island. The air was always clean and sharp, tasting of salt and pine. On one such Sunday, the sun was a rare and welcome sight, breaking through the persistent gray clouds. Sunlight glinted off the calm waters of the Sound. He saw families laughing, couples walking hand in hand. He felt a brief, distant pang, not of loneliness, but of memory. He thought of Zora, not with anger, but with a kind of detached pity. He had heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had moved to Portland, trying to start over. He hoped she found what she was looking for. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. Forgiveness was the final step in cleaning out the wreckage. He sat on a weathered log, looking out at the majestic silhouette of Mount Rainier in the distance. He had learned a hard lesson, one that had been paid for with his heart. He learned that true wealth isn't measured in the price of your house or the brand of your car. It isn't found in a prestigious job or a curated social life. True wealth is integrity. It's self-respect. It's the quiet peace that comes from knowing you are a person of character, a person who, when faced with betrayal, chose strategy over rage and justice over revenge. His life was simpler now, but it was authentic. It was his. The security he now felt didn't come from a camera on his front porch. It came from within. He pulled out his phone, not to check for notifications, but to answer a text from his sister. He smiled. A genuine, easy smile. The sun was warm on his face. He was healing. He was free. What do you think is the most valuable thing a person can possess? Is it something you can buy? Or something you have to build within yourself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and please remember to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the face of betrayal.